22.3 is in the books. And that one I did not have a chance to do, but it looked terrible. Awful. I want to know part of that one. It was one of those that like didn't look too like, oh, that's not a whole lot. But I watched many people get to the old bar muscle ups, be like, oh, I'm going to rip through these no problem, and then you hit the wall.
It's funny because I want to do a better job of this, but like when people are like, oh, this is boring, oh, this is a lame workout, I'm like, oh yeah, how'd you do? Because I did that the other day when someone's like, oh, this deadlift workout was dumb, and I went and looked at it. I'm like, oh, how'd you do? Oh, you got to the round of nines on the backside and didn't sniff anything beyond that. Okay,
looking like it did its job.
Yeah. Looks like it was effective. This one, like, we all kind of knew, right?
Yeah.
You look at what was.
Well, a lot of people knew beforehand.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that was a mess in itself, on multiple levels.
Yes.
And the one thing I'll say that I was bummed that it got leaked and took away a little, just a little bit of the moment from that affiliate owner that got to announce that workout.
Agreed.
The thrusters, bar work, like pull-up bar work, double unders, you had to know that was coming, and it was paired nicely in a way that, from what I saw at the affiliate level, taking this into like the broader open purpose, at the affiliate level, I saw a lot of people at my gym and at other gyms being celebrated around doing this event, in whatever way they could. We have 60 plus athletes, we have 55 plus athletes. We have people across all broad spectrum of gym goers. All of them felt like this was a finale where they could test themselves, practice some of the gymnastic skills that they've been doing all year long. And then for the athletes that were maybe a step above, plan on finishing this thing. And then it becomes, how fast can you go?
Yeah.
And even in those moments, the 135 thruster was no joke. I saw people fail in the clean and everything like that. And so I thought, in a vacuum, I thought it was a very good test. It's something that I'm going to be doing multiple times throughout this year as a way to test my capacity in certain areas, because there are things within the framework of that test that I need to work on. And I think a lot of people are going to do that as well.
Yeah.
Some of the top scores in it were mind-boggling. Insane.
Like I mean, I looked at some of these, and
Scott Tetlow 407.
I don't know, I don't know how it is possible to move that fast with those movements. Like, I just don't see how people do that.
I watched.
It's something that I can't even comprehend, and I think that's a cool thing about CrossFit and about the sport in general, is that you and I can go and do the exact same thing, the exact same weight, the exact same floor setup that these people are doing, and see how much better they are than us. It's just unreal.
I props to Noah Olson. He put out an amazing score very quickly. He did it basically the next day, put out a score that was right up there with, it ended up being 6th worldwide, and he only did it once. I watched that, and all I could think of is, how the heck is anyone going to beat that? Because it looked like, with the exception of maybe a chalk break here or there, or a transition here or there, he was pretty much sprinting the entire time. And it went unbroken in all the movements. And then you get something like Scott Tetlow, Augustine Riquelme, some of these athletes that are great at gymnastics, and a 407 for the men. I watched.
And look, it's not like you can set your floor up anymore to like cut down on those transitions. Like, it's all pretty standard. You got to have the barbell a certain place. Like, you can't, like we've seen in the past, people hack it to where they're like jumping right off and they'll be able to do the thrusters. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah. Now, granted, she got a false start, so it got adjusted later on. But like, Tia put out her workout video with some edits in, and I think I texted you. I was like, I think Tia was hovering around the 4-minute mark, like based on my how's that? My amateur video editing skills. I cut 3 minutes out of Goodfellas, but it looked like Tia could be dancing around the 4-minute threshold, and the capacity in that regard, knowing how that felt, is just insane. And I think that touches on, from a efficacy standpoint of this stage, it definitely highlighted the disparity between the elites and the rest of the crew. We saw that in the announcement.
I think all the workouts did that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that there was a point in all of these where you look at, you know, the community at large and you say, okay, we'll all be happy to get here. And I think a lot of us, the majority of the community, if they said, if I got into the bar muscle ups, I'd be super happy. And that's 12 minutes. Okay. 12 minutes it took you to get into that. And then you look at the elites, like, yeah, I'm done in 4 minutes. You know, that, so all of these had that point. Same with 22.2. Some of us were just happy to get in the backside of that. Others were finishing it at 7 minutes. There was that clear separation there. And so we'll get into the programming here in a second, but I thought all of them did a really good job of providing people a place where they could not only participate, but also test themselves. Because you need to be pushed a little bit in the open. Everything, it shouldn't all be easy. There should be parts of these workouts, especially in the last one, you're like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that, but I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Now, how do you get your first muscle up? Like, how many people got their first bar muscle ups because they did this workout and they got pushed? But they also provided you with that line. It's like, okay, this is where the elite are going to excel and put themselves, you know, above all of us.
And it's, I mean, and that they did. We had some amazing performances on both sides of it. You know, Mal officially gets the win on this last one. Tia a second behind her after adjustments. But I mean, do you want to talk overall?
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Why don't we talk about just the top scores first and just what stood out with the workout. Let's just start with the men because you got Scott Tetlow, 4:07.
7.
First, he wins the event, and I'm thinking these are official. I'm by now because
they are. His has been confirmed.
Yeah, Augustin Riquelme, second at 4:15.
Yeah,
Georges Caravis, Cedric Lapointe, and Colton Mertens tie. No shock for Mertens there.
Yeah,
not a lot of ROM there.
The bulk pony,
and then Noah Olson, 6th. Justin Medeiros and Jake Berman tie at 7th, and Saxon Panchik, who won the whole thing, finishes in 9th. So unbelievable.
Oh man. The margins were, I mean, you look at how slim the margins were, you know, even from like the top 10, like 3rd through 11th, you know, is 9 seconds. And then for Tetlow to still win by 15, I mean, hats off to him. You know, he's trying to kind of, you know, 2020 he qualifies through the Open, doesn't perform as well last season. You know, this is a little bit more of him getting into Open form that we saw, you know, 2 seasons ago. And, you know, getting to blitz an Open workout like this, you know, get a nice little prize money for that as well. And, you know, build some momentum moving forward. But man, there are very few athletes at the top of this individual workout leaderboard you look at and you'd be like, that's a surprise. I think all of them pretty much you're like, okay, you would expect them to do well here.
Yeah.
So there were very little surprises, I think, towards the top of the leaderboard as far as the men were concerned.
Yeah, and then on the women's side, we'll go over there for a second. Let me call this up. Women, Mal O'Brien. First, a second, and a first. And she beat Tia Toomey by 1 second because Tia had a score adjustment because of a false start.
And Mal had a score adjustment too, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it actually dropped a second.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so upon review, they submitted 4:12.
Both of them.
Mallory did.
Okay.
Tia submitted 4:07.
Okay.
False start penalty, as has been the standard for a false start, 5 seconds. Yep. Mal submits 4:12, would have been a tie. The time on the clock when she finishes the thruster and starts dropping the bar, it's 4:11 till the bar is like clearly on its way down. So it was like, oh no, you actually submitted too slow a score.
Oh wow.
So
good on her.
She rightfully gets the win there.
Which is not surprising given our conversation with Matt Fraser, how he said, like, we want to be very detailed oriented here and not leave anything to guess. Of course, the start, you're gonna get dinged on that. But God, that's Mal O'Brien, unbelievable.
Yeah.
2 wins in a second. Nuts. But I think we need to temper that a little bit because this might be a bigger conversation too, is that I feel that the Open now is, I don't think the competition season really starts until quarterfinals.
Sure.
And I think it's just because, all you got to do is finish inside the top 10% for these athletes and you're moving on. And that's, and from what I understand, that the quarterfinals workouts will ramp up.
Yeah.
Like this is not going to be something that you just take lightly and do. Like this is going to be a challenge. And gone are the days now where, you got Patrick Burke waiting with a loaded barbell, refreshing the leaderboard to see if he needs to do the
or
workout.
carry hair in the HQ office.
Exactly. Or Dan Bailey doing it 5 times on a weekend. Like that's not going to happen anymore.
No.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No. And I do think there's actually some takeaways for the elites in that regard, or an up and comer, because if all these athletes, even at the top, are doing this once, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're treating it as a game day type simulation. Hey, let's strategize, let's gear up, let's give it our best, one shot, and then let's keep it moving. If under that scenario, which I think is more closely similar to what you're going to get on a game day, like when you show up to semifinals, when you show up to the games, and you're able to contend, well, I think that's more of a valuable sign for your prospects moving forward in the season than maybe, say, doing the same workout 3 times, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for Mal, these aren't even really the things that they're working on or focused on right now in her development. So for her to still have this engine base, this metabolic conditioning base, and I think this, this goes back to programming as a whole, which we can touch on a little bit. Her engine and her metabolic base is still so high that she's contending with someone like Tia, even though Tia is still coming back from bobsled, and she's beating out the elite in the sport on a regular basis on some of these more entry level, I guess, conditioning pieces. And that's not to say that Cara Saunders, Laura Horvath aren't putting good efforts in. They were 3rd and 4th in this workout, and I think that's a tremendous workout for both of them. But I still think there's something to hang your hat on for someone like Mal in winning. Saxon especially.
Agreed. And I think too, it's like you can, how do I want to put this? I think you can, when you look at someone like Mal and Tia, those two at the top, you can say, wow, especially Mal for sure winning and looking the way that she looks, and with the whole season ahead of her, and Tia coming off the bobsled training and wondering what she's going to look like going into the Open. So that's cool, but I don't think that you then, it's the reverse is true when you see someone who finishes 75th.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Okay, fine, you got in. I'm not even going to make a judgment on that. Because remember, last season, Justin Medeiros was 57th, won the games.
Yeah.
Like, this is all about let's just put one in the middle of the fairway and let's move on and let's do our work in the quarterfinals. So while I think you can be impressed with people at the top, I don't necessarily think you need to be concerned about people who are, I don't even want to say squeaking in, but that you would think in a normal competition would be in the top 10 who are 50th or below. I don't think there's any cause for concern there, because I think a lot of those athletes are like, look, man, I just did the workout. I put my score in. I knew I was going to make it. There's no reason to let this disrupt my training. I have different goals. I want to win, I want to win semifinals, or I want to make sure I'm peaking at the games. And this is not part of the plan. Like, I'm still alive.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% on that. And I think this is a scenario where wherever you're at as an athlete and what you're trying to accomplish here, the data really works for you in this regard, and it's the enterprise run-up car. Gives you the tools to be your own boss. And
wow, that was not a Marvel reference.
No, it was
well done.
Step Brothers. I gotta get it.
Do you want to talk about programming? Because I think I was a little surprised that there was not and I don't want to say not a heavy barbell, because I think you could make the argument that 225 on 22.2 was technically a heavy barbell. But I was a little surprised that there wasn't like a complex or a lift or something. And I can, in the scheme of the Open being what the Open is supposed to be, I can understand it. But you brought up something really interesting to me that definitely shifted my thinking a little bit on this one.
I think there are a couple ways to slice it, right? I think you have to ask the question, did the Open do its intended job? So you have to define what the job of the Open is. And I think that's something that's being refined as we go along in this new system. And then you can also, once you do that, you can ask the question, well, in what ways could it have done that job better? And I think that answer might shift a little bit depending on where you're at. So, first and foremost, I think there are 2 primary goals, right? I think the Open is the official kickoff to the season, and it needs to be a stepping stone on the path to finding the fittest on earth. that's where the purpose it serves from a competitive
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, right? And then I think from a community standpoint, it needs to provide an avenue for competition for the broader community to take part, have fun, test themselves, learn about their fitness, and ultimately help guide their training towards being healthier and happier, more fit in the future. And I think those are two very distinct things. And I think this is where the lines get blurred, where, CrossFit is a sport, CrossFit is a methodology, and how the open can kind of pour into both of those buckets. That being said, I think the introduction of the level system as a means for ranking and sorting people in the community at a broader scale to be able to leverage competition for their own fitness goals going forward adds a little extra wizard pepper in there, for you to have to.
And I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Because I think without that, I think you have to start to look at it, the open and quarterfinals, as the cutoff points for having a more complete test, right? I think in that regard, you have to start to look at the hierarchy of development of fitness development, the pyramid that Greg Glassman laid out, that I think is still very valid. Below nutrition, like above nutrition is the foundation, right? The next one above that is metabolic conditioning. So I think from a filter and test standpoint, in many ways, the open needs to serve as that next piece. And weightlifting and gymnastics are smaller pieces of the puzzle. And if you look at how CrossFit defines weightlifting and gymnastics, it's not necessarily how the sports of gymnastics and weightlifting define it. I think that then the open as a test, in order to filter for the next stage properly, starts to have a little bit more validity behind it.
Yeah. I think to your point of, providing the community with competition and making sure the right people get to quarterfinals, I think it absolutely did that. I think these three tests, there's a reason why the same people wind up on top of the leaderboard all the time. Like, they're the fittest. Like, I don't think there's anybody out there who can say, well, if I just had a heavy front squat, I would have been able to make it to quarterfinals. Maybe,
yeah.
But do you want, does that person have any chance of advancing if that's what you needed?
But and if you go off of how CrossFit defines, monostructural weightlifting, gymnastics, all those things, and then the broader intent of each test, there was weightlifting in the first one with a dumbbell snatch. Whether you agree that's heavy or not is almost irrelevant. You have weightlifting in the second one with a deadlift couplet, and you have weightlifting in the last one with an ascending thruster. That's not to say it can't be better. And I think that's where we start to shift into the could it have done better. But I think, as far as being that community celebration point and allowing people to celebrate their fitness, test themselves, see where they can improve in many of those elements, I think it did a good job in that. And I think that, combined with the level system, I think one way it could have been better in my mind is maybe having a slightly heavier loading component to it that ultimately adds one of the, I don't want to say a strength element, but yeah, because remember, strength is only one of the 10 general physical skills, right? You're talking about something that is essentially 1/10 of the equation here. But I think if we're using this as a reference point for a vast majority of the community to move forward, to be able to go to other competitions and compete,
agreed.
I think that it would be better served to include that in. I think you could still do that and also accomplish the goal of, did we filter for quarterfinals better? So that's kind of where I sit on that.
So let me just make sure that I understand what you're saying. And I think I do. It's that when it comes to the open being the open, from the first two parts of competition for the community, chance to sort of push yourself, and getting the right people to quarterfinals, mission accomplished. But when it comes to giving you a complete picture of maybe what level you're at going into, given the new level system, maybe not a total complete picture.
Yeah.
Maybe there's just a little bit left. And so do you not think that a 135-pound thruster at the end of a workout is part of that? And I'm not making that argument, but I'm thinking maybe somebody could.
I think it has a mild part of that, because by the time you get there, it is very different. It's a very different circumstance than some of the other ways we see weightlifting elements sprinkled in. And so much so that, I don't necessarily agree that the open has to be like a complete test in and of itself.
I don't either. And I think that's what I think. Yeah.
I think that's where it gets mixed up a little bit.
And I was talking to Chase Ingram about this. It's like through 3 weeks, we have a small portion of what is going to be the entire picture once we get to Madison.
Yeah.
It's like the artist just got out his paint palette and put a brush, like one brush stroke on the picture. Like, oh, that's terrible. What are you doing?
Drew the big circle.
Right. Drew the big circle.
Yeah.
Right. Where the happy trees and the fluffy little clouds are going to be. And now all of a sudden you're like, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. Well, you don't know what the whole picture is going to look like yet.
I think to flesh out the level system more, I think we should see a little bit more, maybe a weightlifting component or maybe a strength element that fits in a different way than the way it was the quote unquote strength pieces were used today this year. I think in general, I think so much of CrossFit is metabolic conditioning.
Yeah.
I think metabolic conditioning ultimately is king when it compares to all the other elements of how CrossFit applies fitness. And, that's my own personal belief, but I do think that you see that play out more often than not. And so I think it makes more sense that, when you're broadly applying tests to the community, making sure that their metabolic conditioning is on point seems to be a much better piece. I went on, I had an article, actually, I'll give credit again too. So there was I said this on a Morning Chocolate Bottom Line. I do what everyone does when you're looking for opinions and you go to Reddit, right? And I think there was a statement, and I'll give him credit again, Eagleman 171, that put a comment down that I think resonated with me a little bit.
Efforting that.
Yeah. It says CrossFit HQ defines fitness as nutrition first, metabolic conditioning second, gymnastics third, weightlifting fourth. In this first stage of a test that has 4 sections of winnowing, they're going to heavily bias metabolic conditioning with basically a few checkpoints of you can't just be a cardio monster with no skills or strength to make it to quarterfinals. That means that likely you will not get heavy Olympic lifting, more than one workout with advanced skills, or sprinty barbell power output workouts in the open anymore. Long term, I suspect this means that we'll see the average size of CrossFit. That I wasn't entirely sure of. But he said, as an affiliate owner, I will say that having a 3-week open that is accessible to most of our members and allows for opportunities for lots of PRs, like people get their first pull-up, chest to bar muscle up this week, first wall walk, RX dumbbell snatch box jump in week 1, is absolutely the right move from a business perspective. Combining that with the levels method has the potential to turn the open back into a very lucrative part of CrossFit's offering. If you're someone who likes to sling a heavy barbell around and do the cool tricks, but doesn't love suffering through lots of burpees, dumbbell work, and moderate to light barbell cycling, the open is probably your last stop in the foreseeable future. Love, and this is where I give it. I got to give him credit, a fellow rig shaker, a 6'1", 240-pound lover of lifting and flying around on the pull-up bar, who's been thinking about this a lot in the last 2 years. I think he touches on a lot of good points there. I think there could be some things that I previously mentioned around, how can we best fill the buckets of being accessible, allowing people to take part, filtering for quarterfinals, and properly sorting people for levels. And I think that's just part of the growth process. And I, for one, loved the environment that these 3 tests provided in my affiliate.
I was pissed I only got to do one of them.
Yeah. Our gym was popping. Granted, like a lot, and I said this before, a lot of credit goes to Tammy and Michael Spaeth and Daniel J and the whole West crew for making that environment. But it felt like every week there were more and more people hopping in and feeling comfortable hopping in.
I felt, and I think it was because this was the first time in a while I've been in the environment, but especially week 3 at CrossFit Hendersonville, that whole environment that was there and how great that gym was and how thankful the athletes were to be out there. It felt like, okay, we're back. We are heading in the right direction. And I think now, while the open is technically the beginning of the game season, I don't think it really starts in earnest until quarterfinals, and that the open is now, as it should be, more community focused. And I think moving forward with the live announcements, you're probably going to see more situations where we have community athletes throwing down in these. It's still cool to watch, and I think you still need that. The big names, it was great to watch Justin Medeiros and Saxon Panchik go head to head. Like, you still need that element, but I think there's going to be more of a community-based element moving forward. And I'm all for it. You know, I think that we can put the focus on the elites and the super elite on the quarterfinals moving forward. And I think that it's really cool now that it feels like more of a community event.
Yeah, and I also like harken back to like some of the stuff that I come from the school of Pat Sherwood sometimes,
Yeah.
and he's like, it doesn't need to be flashy sometimes.
Yeah,
People are complaining that, oh, I think this is boring programming, whatever. I'm like, I think you're missing the point
I
here.
agree.
I think you're missing the point of like testing fitness and providing an avenue for people to throw down. I mean, like Monday, right? We come into the gym. I'm thinking about redoing it, and I think this is a great example of the open refinding its footing. And I actually also encourage people. Brian Friend wrote a great article about the open evolving and what's happening with the test. And we agree on a lot of the points. But and I have to go through it again because I think he was a little bit more critical than maybe I was. But I walked in on a Monday and we had athletes across the board excited to retest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll give a shout out to, Mitzi Petzinger, who is a master's athlete in our gym, showing up to retest before the 5 p.m. deadline because she's excited about the potential of maybe going to quarterfinals in her master's division. And this is like, this is someone that, I would say generally, like, is just excited to come into the gym and move.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teacher and educator, it's a release for her and her husband. And she's fired up to like compete again. Like,
Man,
to me, that is the good stuff right there.
I can't wait to get back into something like regular training.
Yeah.
And then, both my wife and I have talked about, like, we need to get back into some sort of routine, with Max and everything. It's kind of thrown a major wrench into that. And then I broke my foot. That didn't help. But I can't wait. Like, I really can't wait. I got just being around it again and being out there in the community. I think that I know that they would have liked you can always say this. They would have liked more people to have signed up, but the fact that they had the 5th most and that they did grow is positive. And I think now, for the first time since 2018, they had what I would deem sort of a full speed ahead, all guns blazing season of open announcements.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're back.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked a lot about how long it is going to take to undo the damage and I think people underestimate the amount of damage that was done from 2018 to 2020. It's going to take time to undo that. I think this was the first big step towards doing that. I think they're going in the right direction. And I am with you on the levels thing. I didn't think about that. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, for sure. And I still think that, like, and it's very easy to miss the forest for the trees here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I've been forced to like take a step back and like look around at the gym, right? Like, whether or not I'm happy with how I performed or how those tests lined up for me and what I think should be, involved. I look around and I see everyone in my gym like excited. Saturday we had, the most people I've ever seen in our gym since they moved to that location. We had free Italian beef sandwiches getting thrown out, which were delicious. We had people getting after it, people retesting, people celebrating each other. We had the coaches going at the end and everybody rallying around their coaches. It's like all these signs of a healthy community that ultimately I think are almost paramount to some of the small critiques that people might have that more often than not come down to elements of personal preference.